Hi, welcome to the Optimizing Your Brilliance podcast, where we get to the source of what makes people brilliant and explore how to eradicate the barriers that stop you from shining. By shining, I mean being at your absolute best in both work and life. You'll hear from business and thought leaders who bear all and share their insider secrets, along with my episodes focused on optimizing your performance, productivity, success, and well-being. My name is Estelle Reid, founder of Be, executive coach, speaker, and best-selling author of Inner Brilliance, Outer Shine, 10 Antidotes to Imposter Syndrome, Workaholism, and Stress. So, if you're ready to take your work life to the next level, let's begin. You know, when you meet someone who seems to be able to just do it all, my next guest does just that. 5 kids, a partner, 4 dogs, 3 books, and she's built a beautiful home on the shores of Lake Windermere. She's also renovated and now runs the Heaning Estate, a collection of beautiful dwellings you can stay in. But it does make you wonder, how is all of that possible? Well, Deborah shares the secrets to her success, and you'll hear how achieving big things takes real bravery, a willingness to dream and learn, and the discipline to take consistent steps, even when fear or doubt shows up. Deborah credits her daily routine, which includes taking care of her well-being, for making the impossible possible. In this episode, Deborah pulls back the curtain on life as an author and businesswoman. Hello, can you do me a favour? Would you mind either liking or subscribing wherever it is that you listen? So maybe that's on YouTube or Spotify or Apple, because that will help us to keep going and keep growing. The other thing that will be really helpful is if you could share it with someone that would also benefit from the content. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Right, let's get on. So, welcome everyone. I have got Deborah Lyon with me. Deborah is a writer and entrepreneur based in the Lake District with a background in financial communications and a long-standing interest in British travel and heritage. After nearly 2 decades in Cumbria, she combines writing with running a hospitality business on the shores of Windermere. She is the author of Lake District Unlocked and the children's novel Time Waif, and holds a master's degree in creative writing. And also for the European, she covers travel, hospitality, and culture. And let me tell you, I follow Debs on Instagram, and I was just saying how amazing her feed is. I live vicariously through her travels. And the way we met actually was through LinkedIn originally. I don't know if you can remember this. I was living in Derbyshire, and the Reeds go away on big family gatherings, and I spotted the Heaning Estate, and I was like, oh wow, this is just a magical place. This is absolutely perfect for our family. And then of course we relocated back up north where our family is. But for those of you that are watching this, you'll see there's QR codes on Deborah's screen in a moment, but you can find out more about the Heaning Estate, which is absolutely beautiful, and also about the book that Deborah's just recently published, which is The Time Waif and the Roman Road, which we'll dive into in a bit. But going back to how we met originally, so we were connected on LinkedIn, and then I had relocated back up north to Cumbria. I was on my very first night out, which was a magical moment in itself, in that I was driving from Kendal to the boathouse. So we used to have a little cronky boat in the marina at Windermere Marina Village. We'd spent many holidays there, and I was meeting my old Cumbrian best mate, Alex, for a night out. And I was like driving along through Staveley, and I thought, I can't believe, past the Heaning Estate, I can't believe that I'm actually here. Anyway, Alex and I are sat in the boathouse, and I was looking across the room and I thought, those ladies over there look like they're having a fabulous time. I was drawn to you
Yeah,
because you were beautifully dressed as well, and you really caught my eye. And I thought, I don't know, I really feel like I know that lady over there, but I'm not sure where from. Anyway, long story short, I then do a post on LinkedIn about my night out, and you put two and two together, didn't you?
that's right. Yeah. I remember it clearly because I'd followed you for years. I think even before I'd made the Cumbria connection, I followed you because I'd read all your books and followed you for coaching guidance and just found it absolutely fantastic. So then when I realized there was a Cumbria connection, I sort of thought, that's interesting. And then that night in the boathouse, I looked over and exactly the same thing. I felt a real connection. And I knew Alex anyway from around the village. It's a very small village, Windermere. Everyone knows everyone, as I'm sure you're learning now. You're living in the Cumbrian community. Everyone gets, it's very small community up here. And so I knew Alex nodded over, didn't know the lady she was with, but thought, looks familiar. And then the next day you put the post on LinkedIn explaining that you've been out, you had this magical night with your friend. And I thought, I don't believe it. That's who I saw in the boathouse last night. So I DM'd you and said, I think, we saw each other last night, funnily enough, and I've followed you for years, as you know, and really admire your writing and your coaching work. And so, yeah, so we became friends through that.
So I was saying that your Instagram account is amazing. It's like picture postcard often. I love seeing what you've been up to. I was saying earlier that like sometimes Deborah it'll be like a notepad and imagine a beautiful French desk and window and you're writing away and I think, oh, I wonder if she's writing her next book. And next minute you're on some amazing lake in Switzerland or,
Yeah, yeah,
it's
yeah.
so.
We do love to travel, and I mean, I think that's one of the beauties of working in the industry that I work in. Running a hospitality business means that we do get the opportunity to go and see a lot of other businesses, or at least that's our excuse to go and see what other people are up to and learn best practice, whilst having a very nice time exploring on the way. But I've always traveled, even, when I was in my teens, I backpacked around Europe and slept on station benches. So it's not all been beautiful lakes in Switzerland. I might have seen the lakes, but probably wasn't sleeping on such a nice bed as I am now. But yeah, so I've always loved travel. It's always been a really important part of who I am, and I think it's such an important way to expand your mind, to meet new people, to see different cultures, and I studied languages at university, so that's always been important to me, to be able to communicate with the people in the places that I'm at and the places that I
Mm.
visit. So yeah, it's a lovely, and of course Instagram is an illusion. I mean, if only my life was always like that. But that's a tiny, snapshot of a moment, perhaps. But a lot of the time, it's actually really hard graft. But it does give you a lot of very nice moments as a consequence. So I'm certainly not complaining.
And so, tell me about the European thing then. So, how does that work? Are any of those shots for the European or?
So the European relationship is through a PR guy that I've been using recently, who's absolutely brilliant down in London. And it started out, he did some promotional work around the book when Time Wave came out last year, and did a great job sort of getting me in front of a lot of reviewers and so on and so forth, because it's really difficult to break into that market when you're a first time novelist, as you'll know. And so it was a kind of slow burn relationship with him, and he then he got me a couple of articles. He has a connection with the European, and there was a really nice piece about Time Wave and a excellent review in the European, which was really gratifying. And then as a result of that, he sort of said, actually, I'm quite interested in the backstory, not just the book, but the fact that you run the hospitality business as well, the holiday lets. And I'm just wondering if there's something else we could do around that. So that's how it came about. So basically, he pitched me to them. They have a range of kind of occasional columnists who just do the odd bit for them now and again on certain sectors that they're experts in. So my area is travel, culture, and hospitality, which are basically three things that I'm hugely interested in. So it sits really nicely alongside the other stuff that I do.
Wow. And so before we hit record, one of the reasons I said that I wanted Deborah on the podcast is, well, one, I really respect and admire you. I have you on an absolute pedestal, and I always think, blimey, how does she do all of that? So, so, so I think you do an incredible amount. So my first question is, so that people can get a sense of who you are, is
Yeah,
what does your typical day look like from start to finish? And
yeah,
what are kind of your non-negotiable routines that I
yeah,
guess
yeah, yeah,
keep, yeah.
yeah, absolutely. Well, I am super disciplined, I think. And that is when you say, how do I get the things done that I do? It's probably not as much as you think, but it's through being disciplined and repetition. It's really boring, but I'm afraid that's the way that I think the only way you can fit a lot into your day. So I get up super early. I get up at 5 most days, and I sort of follow a regime that I read in a life coach called Robin Sharma, who I like, who I'm sure you know very well. And he talks about the 20-20-20 rule between 5 and 6 in the morning, which is 20 minutes of kind of meditation, visualization, journaling, that sort of stuff. So I always journal every single day. I just sit down and write down what I want to get out of the day, what I'm grateful for, those sorts of things. And try and find a great quote that gets me going, particularly if I'm feeling a bit, I don't feel like doing this today. Just try and get myself moving. If it's winter, I always put my light on. I have a light to help, get you going again in the morning, because I do find the darkness really, really difficult. The days sometimes feel very long in Cumbria. So I sit there doing my journaling with my light on in my PJs with a cup of tea, and then I try and get in the gym. So I try and get in the gym most mornings, or get outside for a walk, or do some weight training, or so I'll just stick on. I train twice a week with a trainer, which is one of my non-negotiables, doing strength training, which I think when you get to a certain age as a woman, it becomes really important that you train with weights, to build up, muscle mass and your bone density and all those sorts of things. That's really important to me. Otherwise, I just get out in the fresh air and do a big walk, that sort of stuff. Um, and the other thing is 20 minutes of just learning, reading a book that inspires you, or something uplifting, something positive, something that you can think, right, okay, it'll set me up for the day. So that's my kind of golden hour between 5 and 6, and I try and get those things done if I can. I don't always, but that's pretty much how I kick the day off. And
Wow.
then it's getting the kids up, getting the kids to school, the usual stuff, just getting all that out of the way before we get on with the business of the day. And um, I try to do a certain amount of work on the healing every day, a certain amount of work on writing every day. I try to write 1,000 words a day if I can. Um, Not always possible, but I think even if you write garbage, if you're a writer, you have to try and write every day. It's almost muscle memory. It's a bit like exercise. You've got to keep at it, and now and again you just get the odd nugget and think, okay, yeah, I've really made progress with that. Other times it just, you know, gets shredded, but at least you've written. And then generally it's picking up the kids from school, family time, and I go to bed really early because I get up really early. So I don't often socialize. When I sing you at the boathouse was one of my very rare nights out. I don't really go out a lot. Um, and but then when we're away, we'll tend to get out more and go to the theatre, that sort of thing in the evening, go out for a meal. But when we're in Cumbria, we just tend to hunker down and enjoy the house, enjoy the family, the usual stuff. But I'm normally in bed by 9 o'clock, because you can't do it at both ends of the day.
Yes, no, it is about finding your rhythm, isn't it? In terms of,
Yeah.
because I think we've had exchanges about
Mm.
being a lark or a night owl. You see, I'm more of a an owl.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Exactly. It doesn't work for everyone, and I think everyone has different different rhythms, different things that work for them. I've always been a morning person, and that's increased as I've got older. So I don't find it hard to get out of bed unless I've had a late night. So my natural rhythm is to get up early. So that's my most productive time of the day for sure. And also because the
Yeah.
house is quiet, which makes a difference as well.
It's so true.
Yeah.
So, so just so that we can take a deeper dive and people can understand who you are. So what's your origin story? What makes you you?
Yeah. So I was born in Salford, near Manchester. And at the time, my parents were just beginning to build a business, which it went on to be very successful. So I grew up in quite an entrepreneurial family, I would say. So I was always surrounded by business, surrounded by people working very hard, but from a very working class background. Um, but my parents always really, really believed in the value of education. So they always encouraged me to read from a very young age. I was a big reader. And I was quite a studious kid, so did pretty well. And I was one of the first in my family to go to uni, and headed off down there, which I really enjoyed for 4 years. I studied French and English literature at university, so that was great. Had a year in France teaching, living in Versailles, which was lovely. And I think again fed my passion for travel and different cultures and living in different cultures and experiencing, different places. And yeah, then did a master's in public relations at Manchester. That was my first master's that I did when I was in my early 20s. And then essentially started working in financial PR 23, 24 in London, and did that until I moved to Cumbria.
And so you've been back in Cumbria 20 years, is that
Yeah.
right? Yeah.
Yeah, nearly. Yeah. I came back when my sadly my first marriage ended, and very suddenly. And so I was kind of left on my own with this, newborn baby, which was a little bit of a shock, as you can imagine. So at that point, I lived in London for about another year after that, and then just really wanted to be close to my parents, who um, they lived in Manchester, but they had a second home up here. So, and we'd always come since I was a kid, so I felt very connected to Cumbria. And I'd watched Miss Potter, with which is just fantastic. And her fiance dies, and she decides to go and live in the Lake District for a while to get her head together. So I was totally inspired by that and thought, well, if it's good enough for Beatrix Potter, it's good enough for me. So, I'd been through a big life event myself, and so just packed me and Josh into a car and drove up north, and that was it. We were going to come for 6 months just for me to kind of get myself back on track, really emotionally, and made loads of friends, just as you've done. Settled, found out that there was nowhere else I'd really rather live, and stayed. So 20 years later, here I still am.
What's the story behind the Heaning Estate? So
So the
how
healing,
did you go from
yeah.
there to the Heaning?
Yeah, yeah, it's good. Well, I did a lot of consultancy work when I first came up here, still remotely, which was great. So still in financial PR, which was my area of expertise by then. I'd done sort of, 15 years in London working in that area. And so I carried on doing consultancy, really enjoyed it, going up and down. Josh was growing up, met my husband, had another daughter. So I was kind of in between looking after kids, got three step kids as well into the bargain. So I was busy with that. And then when the kids got a bit older and I had a bit more time on my hands, we'd often thought about buying a property and doing it up. And at that point, we'd built our own home actually. So we sort of knew what we were doing. I thought we did. And we decided that we wanted to buy the Heaney. We wanted to buy a property. We weren't really sure what we wanted to do with it after that, whether we wanted to just sell it on or whatever. So we looked at various sort of cottages and things. Then we came across the Heaney, which was far bigger than we'd thought about doing. So it's a large house and then very small houses and cottages. But we just thought, you know what, in for a penny, in for a pound, let's just go for it. So we bought it and it was completely, well, pretty much derelict. And we had to do everything: roofs, walls, drains, the works, sewage, all of it, infrastructure throughout. My husband is he did his degree in engineering, so he's really good at project management sort of thing, and I'm better at the kind of interiors and the visual stuff. So we were good team on that. So he got the properties restored, and then we just thought, you know what, we both he'd also moved from elsewhere to Cumbria. He wasn't born here. So we both love it so much. We thought actually it's really nice to have these properties that people can come and stay and enjoy Cumbria in the way that we have, even if only for a weekend or a week. So why not let them, and just rather than, sell them on or whatever, let's have lots of people come and hopefully enjoy Cumbria in the way we have. So that's what we did. So we started a holiday letting business about which we knew absolutely nothing, and just cracked on. And it's been great. We opened, well, we were about to open just as COVID hit, which was obviously really difficult. But then it actually worked in our favor in a funny way, because people were allowed, when we were allowed to travel, you were allowed to travel within the UK within a family group. So of course everyone was looking for properties in the UK to stay in. So although we had no reviews, we'd done no marketing, we suddenly found we were full because people just wanted to stay somewhere. And then, of course, the reviews came, people loved it, and we built up a business, from nothing really. And people come and stay. We've had clients who stay 4 or 5 times now. They come back every year. It's become their place, which is great. So that's how that sort of came about. And yeah, it's been sort of more by I would love to say that we planned it all out, but we didn't. We just fell into it, and it's worked out, and we're very happy with how it has. But it's more a happy accident than great planning, if I'm
Wow,
honest.
I know. Well, I think it's incredible. I think you're so brave. That's one of the things I love about you. So, and you also said you've built your own house as well. Tell
Yes.
tell me about
Uh,
that, because that's a big deal, isn't it?
yeah. And again, it wasn't in the plan. We bought a very old, again, sort of derelict house, and we were going to renovate it. But when we went with plans for renovation to the planning authorities at this time, this was, probably 10 years ago now. They said that at the time, I think it's changed since then, but at the time the idea was they wanted sort of new iconic architecture alongside the lake, and they were encouraging a whole new generation of Cumbrian properties. So we thought they said actually we know, what about doing a new build, which we hadn't thought about at all. But the house that we had very little architectural value. Actually, it was pretty ramshackle. So we thought, okay, well, let's give that a go. So again, that was something completely new, which we hadn't really planned on doing, and sort of we're learning along the way. And yeah, there's a lot of lessons to be taken from doing a new build when you don't know what you're doing, but you learn pretty fast. So yeah, we've been in here nearly 10 years now, so
Wow.
it's worked out well in the end, but it was, yeah, a big project because we had the Healing sort of going on at the same time at one period. So we were working on restoring a traditional Lakeland property to its former glories, working with traditional craftsmen, all the traditional, and at the same time working on a modern property, which was at completely opposite end of the spectrum. So we had quite a range of experiences.
Wow, flipping heck. So you said there was lots of learning along the way. What was the major learning for you throughout that experience?
Yeah, I mean I think the major learning is just know what you don't know, own what you don't know, and ask all the time. And if you don't understand it, get people in who know what they're doing. You can't, when you're dealing with traditional Lakeland properties that have 400 years of history, you can't mess about with it. You've got to get it right. And so and in fact, a lot of what we were doing was undoing bad work that had been done in between by people just bodging it. So trying to get it back to how it was, using the traditional Lakeland methods and so on, was really, really important. And for that, you can only use the best craftsmen, local people and craftswomen, local people who know what they're doing, who have years of experience in things like lime mortar, the traditional stoneworking, stonemasonry, all of these sorts of crafts, and within the interiors as well, using local wool weavers and that sort of thing. So it's been fascinating, and all of this we've just learnt on the hoof, and just surrounded ourselves by people who know a heck of a lot more than we do. So that's my
That's
big learning experience.
yeah, no, that's incredible. So I was saying to Deborah that the audience loves authors. That's the impression I've got. And it's that real kind of pulling back it's the Wizard of Oz moment,
Yeah.
pulling back the curtain and understanding the mechanics, how does it work? So tell us about you as a writer. How have you started, or what was the driver behind writing a children's book? Tell us about the
Yeah, sure.
behind.
So I'd always enjoyed writing, really from being a child. I'd always written diaries and letters and magazines and newspapers, and all that sort of thing. And obviously did literature at university. But I think having grown up in a commercial and business oriented family, my instinct was always that that was kind of where my career would go. And that was what in quotes, proper career was. So that's sort of how I ended up doing a job that I really loved in financial PR for a long, long time. But I think that creative, if ever there was something that needed writing, whether it was an annual report or a press release or whatever, I would always be the one to put up my hand for that because obviously there was still that itch in me to that needed scratching, and whichever way it came out. And so I then when I moved up here and had a bit of time to think, the first book I did was a children's travel book, which um, friends were producing a series and said, "Oh, we've done one in London, we've done one in Cornwall, we've done one in Edinburgh, and we'd like to do one in the Lake District. Would you write it for us? Because you live there and you've got a young kid." So Josh was 4 or 5, I think, at the time. So it was perfect because we could go and explore everywhere and do all the sites. And it was it was a travel book written for children so that they would read it rather than their parents and say, "Oh, let's do this, let's do that," and make suggestions. So I got to know the area very quickly, very well because of that, and really enjoyed that. Carried on with my consultancy, but I always told my children bedtime stories and wrote them down, and so that was just something that was in me. And then um, it really came about when I was sort of I went to a museum in Ambleside called the Armit Museum, and I was just one lunch hour strolling around there and saw a headstone, a Roman gravestone, which was found in somebody's garden in 1964, and they knew it was something important, so they took it to the museum, and they knew that it had come from the fort at Ambleside, which was called Galava in Roman times, Ambleside Fort, the most important fort in the region. So the Romans were here for, you know, 400 years, which is pretty astonishing, and they built roads and forts on the tops of fells and all this sort of thing. So it's a fascinating story. And I just thought, wow, I didn't really even realize the Romans had been here. And this tombstone was for a Roman soldier called Flavius Romanus, who was killed in a raid on the fort, it said. Even though at that point the Romans and the Celts, the tribes, the local tribes were actually living quite peaceably. So in my head, I just started writing this story and just thinking, why did Flavius die? What happened to him? What was this raid on the fort? What happened at Galava? Started researching it just really for my own interest, and that was how Time Waif was born, because that tombstone triggered a whole series of questions in my head, and I think the starting point for a novel always has to be a question. Why did that happen? What triggered that? Um, and so, that sort of sense of mystery. And of course, there are no right or wrong answers. No one's going to pop up now and tell us what really happened. So you have the freedom as an author to make up your own story around it. And as long as the facts fit and you've done your research so that you're not saying anything that wouldn't have happened in those times, you're free to pretty much invent what you want, which is what I did. So
No, it's fantastic. And I noticed when I was researching you that you went to Lancaster University as well, didn't you, to study creative writing, was it?
yeah, that I did that a few years ago. So um, yeah, as an adult, I think I suppose it goes back to your imposter syndrome fascination. I was always very much felt, well, I'm a financial PR person. That's what I'm good at. Why on earth do I think I could write? And I needed that sort of external validation that I was a decent writer. And I wanted to hone my craft and get better at writing and learn techniques and all that sort of thing. I thought there must be a lot more to learn here. So I applied for the creative writing course at Lancaster, and I was in my, late 40s then when I did that, and got accepted on the course. And there were a whole range of us, from people who literally had just finished university right through to people older than me. And we had fantastic tutors, and you submitted work and you got peer reviewed every month or so. It's really tough. But that I did my portfolio in poetry, actually, which I really enjoyed as well. But I knew I didn't want to publish poetry. I wanted to publish stories. But is poetry such a precise art? I thought if I can get reasonably good at poetry, then hopefully that will feed into my prose. So that was my thinking behind it, and and it was a very cathartic experience actually, because I worked through a lot of things I'd been through, and that came out in the poetry. So it was a really it was it was it was very positive experience. So finished that, and after that I felt okay. Now I've got my external validation. I've got my master's in creative writing. I know I can write, so now I can go and write my novel. So now my imposter syndrome is slightly abated, but not never completely.
It was really interesting. I heard Steve Bartlett say there was a snippet on LinkedIn the other day, and he was
Mm,
talking about imposter syndrome, and it was such a good reframe. And he said he sees it actually as an opportunity for us to push our comfort zone. And he speaks about being on the Dragon's Den and seeing Deborah
yeah,
Meadham to one side of him and whoever else. And I thought, yeah, that is a really good reframe, because we often feel like imposters, don't we, when we're experiencing something new, it's outside of our
yeah,
experience, our expertise. Um, but I also love, I can't remember who I was talking to the other day, but we were talking about I love doing new and different things. Oh, I know, it was a previous
mm,
podcast guest, it was Andrew. And I was saying how I was going swimming, cold water
yes,
swimming.
yeah,
And I was nervous about that. One, because we've had frost up here, haven't we?
yeah,
And so it's a new experience. I was concerned about how my body might react. Said all these, oh, what if? But it
yeah,
excited me. So I was nervous and excited at the same time. But I always love that feeling of, pushing the comfort zone and
yeah,
doing something different.
yeah,
Where,
absolutely.
how does that work for you in terms of
I
comfort zone?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I'm scared of everything, literally in the world. I'm scared. For someone who writes about and loves travel, I don't like flying. I have to force myself onto an airplane every time I get on. Everything is. I don't know if it was, down to my mum being overprotective. Who knows where these things come from? But I I'm literally, I don't like heights, but I'm doing the Wainwrights. I think you have to accept that most people are like that, really. I mean, I think there are very few people who are fundamentally really bold and just go and really brave and do these things without fear. I think everybody's scared of things to some extent. And I think it's really important to admit that and say, yeah, these are not things that I'm naturally comfortable with. Publishing a book is absolutely terrifying. Getting a review that isn't great, it's like, and thankfully there haven't been many, but you just think, it breaks your heart after all the work you've put into it, but you've got to put yourself out there. You don't have to. You could just sit at home and do nothing and keep your head down and but to me that's a life half lived. You have to if you really want to look back and think, we none of us know what's going to happen tomorrow, you know, and I just I just want to know, if something did happen tomorrow, I could say to my kids, you know what, I had a great time. I did everything I wanted to do, even though I was terrified of most of it along the way. But there's nothing that I haven't done that I didn't really want to do. So, whether it be travel, whether it be having a book published, building a business, all the rest of it, raising a family, that was hugely important to me. And, I was a single mum for a long, long time, and yeah, it's none of it's easy, but then if it was easy, it would be boring. So you've got to go
You,
for it.
you speak the same language. That's one of my mottos. No,
Yeah.
I really, the classic book, Feel the Fear and Do It Anyway. I'm a
Yeah,
big
yeah, yeah, yeah.
believer in that.
Susan Jeffers, yeah.
Yes, the answer is in the title in that, isn't it? So
Yeah,
how,
absolutely.
because I used to fear flying. Previous
Yeah.
podcast that's just been released, he was talking about his fear of flying as well. And I used to had a fear of heights
Mm,
and spaces, enclosed spaces. I
yeah,
used to
yeah.
get
With you.
really bad panic attacks, and so the work I do havening to get rid of fears, basically.
Mm,
And I'd done all this work, and all of a sudden I found myself in a gondola, skiing, which is
yeah,
basically a high up enclosed
yeah.
space, and
Horrific.
no fear whatsoever. I was like,
Oh, amazing.
and I was on my own, and I was doing a vlog, like blah blah blah, and then I thought I can't wait to the vlog. I thought, oh my God, I'm high up and I'm in an enclosed space. In fact, I can't even believe I'm on
Yeah, 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 yeah.
a ski trip. You know,
But yeah, in the first place. But I think, and the point is, Estelle, once you've done it a few times, it's like with flying, still don't particularly enjoy it, but I do it now and I don't, I can get on an airplane and get off at the other end without panicking the whole way. And, I've flown probably thousands of times, but I never enjoy it, but I don't dread it anymore. And the more I do it, if I fly quite a lot in a short space of time, I get better and better at it. So a lot of these things are imagined fears, and you just have to sort of push through it and
how do you push through? What do you do?
how do I do a lot of yoga, and that I find not like on an airplane. That'd be a bit weird. What I mean is that teaches me breathing techniques and so on. So I'm not doing, downward dog in the middle of the aeroplane aisle, but I do a lot of that, and from that, my teacher Carly's amazing, and she teaches me a lot of breathing techniques, and so she knows that, I wake up in the night with insomnia quite regularly, so she's taught me a lot of things to deal with that, box breathing and pressure points that you can push, and these sorts of things. And yes, some people think it's hocus pocus, but it absolutely, it's medically proven. It brings your blood pressure down. It's just slowing your breathing, and it calms everything in your system, in your nervous system down. And I think it's just those sorts of techniques are really, really helpful. Sometimes you just got to make yourself and just think, what's the worst that can happen? you know, which you don't really want to think on an airplane because the worst that can happen is quite, but it's generally
Yeah, yeah.
speaking.
But do you know what I think about that? And going back to your point earlier about, well, I want to make sure I believe in living the best life that you can.
Yeah,
I believe
exactly.
in we're only here once, let's make it a brilliant once.
Yeah,
And let's not lead a boring life. And like you, and I was saying this just to Mike the other day, I said, if life ended tomorrow, I would go, do you know what? I've had a brilliant life.
yeah,
And
exactly. And that doesn't have to be through getting on an aeroplane. You can just
yeah,
travel around Britain and see a million places that are incredible as well. But it's about doing stuff, I think. It's
yeah.
about finding the stuff that makes you happy. And it may be that that's knitting, crocheting, making beautiful things, being creative, whatever, painting or whatever it might be. But I think finding something that is new to learn, something out of your comfort zone as well, which is why we do the Wainwrights. And there have been moments up on the mountain. So the Wainwrights are the 214 mountains in the lakes, as you know. And there have been moments up there that I've been absolutely petrified. The weather's been terrible, we're on a ridge. It's just, you just think, oh, I'm not enjoying this at all. But the feeling of achievement you get when you bag that summit is just fantastic. And as you start ticking them off, and it's a great way of exploring your own backyard, all of those reasons, you're getting fit. And Jez and I do it, my husband, we do it together, and that's our thing. That's our equivalent of date night, because we're in bed for 9 o'clock, so we don't do much in the way of date nights. But our date night is going up a mountain, and we just talk things out, and we're together. We have a sandwich at the top. It's a lovely experience, and that doesn't cost anything. that you can do if you live in Cumbria by just getting your boots on and walking. So
We're so lucky, aren't we? I was saying to a
yeah,
previous guest, she's a triathlon coach. She bags Wainwrights too. She does all sorts of things. And so what I find incredible is that you've got this fear of heights. And I was talking to her about it because one of her pictures was on, what's that ridge? Um,
Striding Edge.
yes. That's her Facebook picture. And I was like,
Wow.
wow, like, oh, it made my hands sweaty just even looking at
Yeah, yeah,
it.
yeah, yeah.
And so we've only done a few Wainwrights, but the very first one I did, we'd hardly even gone very far. And all of a sudden I thought, oh, we're up quite high. Um, and I know
Yeah.
exactly what you mean about, oh, you've got to keep going. And it is that sense of achievement, isn't it, when you get
Yeah.
to the top?
It
How do
is,
you,
and sorry, and again, the more you do, the easier they get. You get better at it. You get better at your technique. Your nerves you can control better because you just get used to that feeling of being high. Even if it's never something I'll be comfortable with, but I can live with it now.
yeah. And how do you keep yourself going? Because with all the stuff, with your
Mm.
writing, with your business, with your Wainwrights, how do you keep going?
Because I think, well, first of all, I think it's about finding a passion. It's finding things that really float your boat. So I love with the healing, I love making it better. I love the fact we employ local people, local craftspeople. I like the feeling that to some extent it's contributing to the community. All of those side of things I really enjoy. Um, so that part of building a business I like very much. So that's a mix of kind of passion and purpose, which is so important, I think. And the writing, I just wake up in the morning and I mean, obviously there are days where you've got a bit of writing block or you're tired, whatever it's not flowing. But generally speaking, writing this series, the Time Wave series, I love my characters. I want to hang out with them in my head. So I can't wait to get to my desk and just see what they're up to, and take them forward in their character development and their adventures. And so they become almost real. So it's almost like hanging out with friends. It's a very strange experience. But if you're world building like that as an author and creating a universe, it has to feel real to you. Otherwise, it won't feel real to the reader. So that's just pure pleasure, really. It's not really work at all. Um, and so I think it's that mix of passion and purpose. And I've read that a lot of times, and it really struck home with me. If you, the, you know, you need to have a passion for something, and that drives you, and it's the purpose that gets you out of bed in the morning. It's knowing that you're contributing in some way, whether for me with the books, it's through child literacy, it's teaching children about historical periods through narrative, through storytelling, rather than sitting in a classroom and just being told it. They can engage through their imaginations with these periods of history. So that's sort of what I'm trying to do. And that's kind of the purpose side, I suppose.
How do you know that you are off purpose and passion? What are your clues? Like you've spoken. So, for
Mm.
example, I fessed up, I have shelved manuscript number two. It was off passion, off purpose. I got blocked along the way. My writing
Yeah.
wasn't flowing. It wasn't half as good as my first book. So I've just scrapped it. How do you know you're off passion or off purpose?
I think when I don't want to do it repeatedly,
Yeah.
if it's just the odd off day, even on off week, then you can sort of write that off and you just think, okay, I'm a bit knackered. I need to take some vitamins. I need to get out in the fresh air. I need to go and do a walk. Jez will quite often say, right, that's it, we're walking. You need a walk because he can tell, that I've gone in on myself or whatever. And that's my therapy. Uh, but I think if after a month I'm still don't have the energy for it, I'm not getting the vibe, I don't want to be doing it, it feels like a chore, that's when I start listening to my gut. And I think gut instinct is so important. If your gut's saying to you, this isn't working, you're on the wrong path here, listen to it. And that applies to loads of things in life, not just work, but whether it's, I don't know, friendships, or whether it's um things that you're doing, hobbies that you're doing for the sake of it, things that you're going to that you don't want to go to, and you're being a bit of a yes person, that you have to kind of check yourself quite regularly, I think. And I think I've got better at that as I've got older. I think, I used to be a terrible people pleaser and just do a million things and try and make everybody happy. And now I'm much better at knowing the people that are important to me and trying to make them happy and make myself happy. Because you can't please everybody.
You
It's as simple as
can't.
that.
So
Yeah.
how did you make, because that is a thing that routinely comes up in coaching sessions. In fact, it was this morning's coaching session, and the poor person is tiring themselves out, people pleasing.
Mm.
How did you, one, recognize it, and then two, do something about it? What worked for you?
Yeah, I think exhaustion was the way I recognized it. Waking up in the night worrying about things, that were just not important. Um, so I knew, when you're in that situation and you're questioning constantly or things are playing on your mind, then there's a reason for that. And I think at that point you have to be really quite strict with yourself and just say, what am I getting out of this? And sometimes, you'll do things for a period of time because there's a greater good, or you can see that there'll be a benefit in the long run, or whatever it might be, or you have to because that's just what you have to do for work or your kids' school or whatever it might be. I don't know, but I think there comes a point where you just think, right, enough is enough. How can I extricate myself gracefully from this situation? Sometimes you can't do it gracefully. Sometimes you have to be quite blunt and just say, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not working for me. I'm really sorry. But and other times you can do things more gracefully and just say, just be polite, but not say yes to everything. Just work on the things that really add value and try and work out why you are doing things. Um, am I going to this event because I want to please the people around me, or am I going because there is a genuine benefit for me, for my family, for the people that matter for my career? Um, and it's getting the balance right, because sometimes you don't know until you go to events, for example, that they are going to be beneficial. Sometimes you are just going for the sake of it. So you've got to be quite ruthless in interrogating yourself about what your motivations are. And I think that's why I always have a sort of monthly check-in on whether I have a rough idea of where I want to go with each year and whether I'm still on that trajectory. And even if that trajectory is right anymore, or whether that's changed. And you have to be constantly sort of interrogating your path in your life, because if not, you're just drifting. And
Mm.
no one wants that.
So I'm going to start bringing things to a close, but one of the questions I always ask is what makes a person brilliant? So I'm thinking for people who are thinking, oh, I've got a booking me.
Mm,
What what would you
yeah.
recommend? What makes a brilliant writer?
What makes a brilliant writer? I think it's authenticity. Um, I think first of all you got to find a story that really fires you up, because if you're fired up about it, it's exactly what you said about your second book. It just wasn't doing it for you, so there's no way it would do it for the reader. So you have to be very honest
Mm,
about that. And
mm,
believe you me, there've been a lot of stories that I've thought about along the way that haven't made the cut. Um, and so I think you have to be authentic. I think you have to find a story that sets you on fire, and then when you do, pursue it really, really relentlessly. Write every day, get your plot worked out roughly where you want it to go. Live your characters, really sort of engage with them in your mind and imagine them as real people, and almost you have to think about it almost 24/7. When I go to bed, sometimes I can work out the whole next chapter just in my mind. And that I think comes through. You've got to really believe in your characters, in the world that you're building. So, but it depends on the sort of book as well. I think the main thing is passion. I mean, I'm talking about
mm.
fictional work here, but I think across the board, if you're passionate about your subject, even if you're writing a memoir or a non-fictional book, um, just be passionate about what you're writing about. Don't just churn something out for the sake of it, because, that's no good to anyone. So,
But
yeah, passion
every
and then structure.
and structure, yes. So
Yeah.
how do you structure? What works for you?
Well, I think as a writer, I mean, everyone's different, and some writers just sit down and can knock a novel out in a couple of weeks, but that's not my way. Um, I'm just really, really disciplined about it. So when I get an idea, I'll do my 500 word summary of what the story's roughly going to be. So I've got my story arc to start with. And then from there, I'll work out roughly, okay, so it's a 70,000, word book. So it's going to be, 40 chapters of 1,500 words, whatever. You work out your sums really. And some chapters will be longer and some will be shorter, but you know roughly where you're going with that. And then I'll do a chapter map. Now that will change hugely while I'm writing, and the story might take me in a completely different direction. But it's very important, I think, certainly for me, to know where the story ends, because otherwise you can end up just, it's like having a map for a Wainwright. You need to know where your summit is and where you're heading for, because otherwise you miss it. And so for a story, you need to know where you're going to, although your characters will take you on different paths along the way. And sometimes your ending might change, but generally speaking, I think having that rough sense of direction is really helpful. And then you've just got to write every day until it's finished. And it's
Yeah.
that simple in a way. It's that hard and that easy.
But everything you've said is true in business. Be authentic, so
Mm,
be yourself. It's got to fire you up. So the
yep,
passion, I think you know, I was saying the other day that I find it easy to work because I love it. Nobody has to
yeah,
say,
yeah,
right, you need to go and work now. I
yeah,
just really, I can't imagine retiring. I really love it. So it's got to fire you up. Then you've got to be relentless. And I was listening to Tony Robbins and he was talking about high performers and they are obsessive.
yeah,
And also, equally, I was going to ask you that, like, sometimes we can be so in our head, can't we, when we're obsessive about things?
yeah,
So it's hard sometimes, isn't it, switching that off and
mm,
being
yeah.
present? How do you do it?
That I think is my yoga really helps with that.
Yeah.
So having and I don't mean doing yoga as such, but the techniques I learned through yoga. So the mindfulness, the presence, the focus on the breath, all of those things, the getting a focal point to meditate on, um, getting in the flow of practice is really important in yoga, as in life, as in business, as in everything, as in writing. So all of those things, I think yoga, I mean, I've been doing yoga since I was in my early 20s, and I do think it is, if you can get into it, because a lot of people can't get into it, but if you can, I think it can be completely life changing.
Mm,
Um, and because of its applicability across your life to help you with other elements of your life. Um, so that, I think, walking, getting out in the fresh air, being aware when you're too in your head actually, and just sometimes getting out, going for a walk, just taking that time to go and make a cup of tea, go and speak to the children, because actually, I remember my daughter saying to me once, you hang out with Tim, who's my protagonist, you hang out with Tim more than you hang out with me, mummy, and it's like, okay, yeah, maybe I have to just dump the characters for a bit and go and actually pay attention to my own real life children. So it's yeah, but as you say, but that obsessive, you have to be obsessive because otherwise it doesn't work. So
yeah,
it's finding that balance is always hard, but without that passion, the obsessiveness, you will not create a great product, whatever that is.
agree. And then the final part, which is just like business, have an end in
Yeah.
mind, have a vision,
Yeah.
where you're taking your organization to, and then have structure, which is the plan. How am I going to
Yeah.
get towards the end? So, isn't it
Yeah.
fascinating that that is the
Yeah, those
same?
parallels. Yeah, I think it is. And I think, even if you're, and that there are many, many truly great writers out there. But I think if you're a half decent writer who can knock a story together, if you are disciplined and you can follow a structure and you have a story that you're really, really passionate about, it's not impossible. I used to just sort of see books in Waterstones and think, oh, I'd love to write a story. I'd love to, and actually, it's doable. You've just got to believe in it and have a plan. And
Mm,
without that, it's not going to happen without you sitting down and writing 1,000 words every day for 70 days. That's how you get a book, and then you have to edit it for another 6 months. But
yeah.
you know, it
But
but
you've just
it. It's the discipline. It's doing it small amounts every single day. Going back to the kind of Kaizen philosophy, you've just got to keep at it and make small improvements.
Yeah. And that's, yeah, because that was interesting. I was wondering where Kaizen was going to come in, and there it is.
Yeah.
But you've mentioned a magic ingredient as well, which is belief. Believe you can
Oh,
do
yeah.
it. And isn't it interesting how action reinforces belief as well? So
Mhm.
how do you believe that you can do it?
Um, yeah, it's a really interesting question because most of the time I don't, and again, it's that feeling the fear and doing it anyway. Most of the time I don't think I can do things. I don't think I can get up that mountain or write that book or open that business or whatever it might be. And I just have to keep telling myself that, if you break it into really small chunks, what bit of that can I do today? So instead of thinking I'm going to write a book, I think, okay, well, I've got a story that I like. Today I'll just write down a rough plot, or I'll go and do some research into the Romans in that period, or whatever it might be. And you break it down into smaller, smaller, smaller chunks until you get a chunk that you can actually achieve that day, that hour, whatever it might be. And just do that. And then over time, it's amazing how those chunks can turn into a 70,000 word novel. Um, but and I think belief comes again through action. I don't think belief precedes the action. I think action produces belief because you suddenly think, oh, actually, I've written a decent 500 words there. I'll do another 500 words. And the more you read it back, and then other people read it, your editor reads it and says, yeah, it's a nice piece of work, the belief gets reinforced and so it goes on. So I think breaking things down into tiny chunks, however small they are, that you can just manage to do that day, that hour. And I think if you're feeling a bit low as well, to go back to your other question about when you're having a difficult time, I think just do what you can, however small that is, but do something, because if you do nothing, it makes you feel worse. So I think that's really, really key.
Yeah, it's like last night. I had to do the gym, was doing the gym. But I just walked for half an hour
Yeah, it's
on
great.
the treadmill. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? I couldn't quite get to a trotting pace, but I walked and I watched a bit of Real Housewives at the same
Perfect.
time. But it was better than
Sounds
nothing.
great. So join you tomorrow.
Um, so, right, our last guest
Yes.
left you a question, and then you get to leave a question for the next
Mm,
guest too. So this is from Andrew Whitehead, senior partner, Shakespeare Marketing You. And he wants to know, is there anything you've done in the past that you regretted?
yeah. Um, yeah. Things I could talk about on here. Yeah, that's a different question. Yeah, things I've regretted. Yeah, I mean, loads. Who hasn't? Absolutely loads of things I've regretted. I think, um, I think probably the biggest thing is not doing things earlier in life, because I sometimes do think, well, what if I'd, started writing in my 20s, for example? What if I just had, going back to our original point, the belief at that point that I could do it? You know, could I be J.K. Rowling by now, or whoever, or Anthony Horowitz, or some great children's writer who I admire? Um, and in a sense, so I suppose my regret in some ways is that I didn't do that earlier. Maybe why did I not move to the lakes earlier? Because it's been such a fantastic move. But then you have to think to yourself, actually, you can't live life wondering, because somehow the timing just falls into place the way it's supposed to be. And actually, I loved my career in financial public relations. I made some incredible friends, incredible mentors. I had a huge dinner down in London last week with a group of them. And, these are people who are just great friends now and who I've learned so much from. And all of that's played into what I do now, the novels that I write, which I think have a certain wisdom that can only really come through age. So I would have written a very different book if I'd written it in my 20s. Probably would have been some chick lit nonsense, but very fair enough, but who knows? But this, I think, is something that I think is a work that I'm really proud of. So maybe I had to wait to find that. So yeah, there are loads of things I regretted that I just didn't do them earlier or have the confidence to do them, or but everything happens for a reason, and you have to kind of believe that, and just believe in the timing.
Yeah, no, I agree entirely. I wished I'd
Yeah,
moved up here donkeys years ago, but if I had, I wouldn't have the business I have today. So it's that.
precisely. Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, what question would you like to leave for the next guest?
Oh, now that's a good. What question? Okay, I would say to the next guest, if you had to give a piece of advice to your 18-year-old self, what would it be?
Great. What would you give your 18-year-old self?
What would I say? I would
Yeah,
say, oh God, because I think I went to university. I was studying down in Oxford, and for me, that was a huge step because I was from the north, I was from a working class background, and for a long, long time, I felt like a fish out of water, but nobody else around me treated me like that. That was all in my head. It took me probably a good year and a half at uni to sort of, and I think, again, it's the imposter syndrome, just to realize that you would find your tribe, you'd find people who were like you, and you could have a really great time. And the same when I moved to London and I started working in financial PR, I think I had the same doubts. So I think I would say to my 18-year-old self, just which is what my mum used to always say to me, but of course you never listen to your mum either. Is just believe in yourself, go for it. You've got it all in there, don't hold back. Just throw yourself into it, have a good time, and have more confidence. That's probably what I would say. But then I'd probably say that to myself nowadays as well. So nothing's changed, I'm just better at hiding it, probably.
Oh, you have been absolutely wonderful. As I say, I already had you on a pedestal, but even more so now. It's no wonder you are as brilliant as you are. I love your morning routine. I think that's fabulous. Already I'm thinking, I wonder if I could shift my morning routine. It is hard in the morning, isn't it, with these dark mornings in
Oh, the dark
winter?
mornings. Yeah, absolutely. That is a grind. I have to say, I'm glad of my sun lamp to cheer me up in the mornings at the moment, and a very strong coffee.
No, but I love your 2020, the way you've broken all that down. I just think you're incredible the way you've built your own house, you've renovated using local people, you've got 2 books under your belt. I know that you've finished writing, haven't you? Novel number
Yeah,
2. Are you
yeah.
allowed to say what that one's going to be called or not?
Well, I'm still finishing the title, but the topic is, so it's the same. It's in the Time Wave series, and Tim, who's the hero this time, goes back to the Viking period. So it's all
Oh,
about the Vikings, and he has a mystery in his modern life which he can only solve by going back in the past to find the answers. So that's the basic premise for the second one. So that's where we're up to on that. So it goes to my editor next week. So yeah, busy
when
weekend ahead.
when is that likely to be
I'm
out?
hoping maybe before next summer.
Yeah,
So in time for the school holidays would be great, but that's with a fair wind. Otherwise, it'll be probably September. So 2 years after the
yeah,
first one.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
It's a
yeah.
long process, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, it is, it is.
Yeah.
But no, it's been a lot of fun. But thank you to you as well for, your amazing book and all the advice you've given me. And I love everything you put on LinkedIn, and it all just makes sense. So,
Ah,
it's
no,
really
pleasure.
appreciated.
Oh, no, it's all part of the service. In essence, I love to help people believe, feel great about themselves, and then do great.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
yeah, no,
comes through.
no. Well, thank you again for coming on. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. If you'd like to be notified when the next episode drops, remember to subscribe. If you found this episode helpful, please share it with someone who might benefit. Finally, if any of these topics have sparked your interest and you'd like to work with me, you can apply for a free discovery call at estellereed.com. Let's see if we're a good fit. You'll also find plenty of free resources there. I'm Estelle Reed, executive coach, speaker, and best-selling author, and this has been the Optimizing Your Brilliance podcast. Thanks for listening. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered professional advice. Please consult with a qualified professional for any specific advice related to your situation.